Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Santa Barbara Harbor Commission regular meeting for Thursday, September 19th, 2024. I'm Adam Stanowak, Chair. With me is Kate Ford, Vice Chair, and the Honorable former Chair, John Stedman. We have two commissioners absent today, but still a quorum. And let's start with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Ford?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Stedman?
Here.
Chair Stanowik?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen and Commissioner McCrae are absent.
Great, thank you. Director Wilshire, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Chair Stanowik, no changes.
Great. Mr. Lopez, do we have any general public comment this evening?
There are no hands raised and no speaker slips submitted.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
Thank you. Sorry, I have a little cough tonight. The Strategic Planning Work Group definitely has a short report, but I believe there's one more report tonight. Is there commercial fishing?
That's correct.
Go for it.
Thank you, Vice Chair. On September the 4th, at Santa Barbara City College, there was a Ocean Industries and Blue Economy Symposium. And the relationship of that to our work group is that you may recall that the City Council suggested the formation of a subcommittee on commercial fisheries to address the lack of infrastructure for our commercial fleet. Later, that the City Council decided to expand that authority and enter into a partnership with the commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara to, in fact, be the lead in partnership with the city on securing infrastructure, as well as to determine whether or not it was possible to have the seafood industry be an economic development and possible economic diversification opportunity for the city's economy. The meeting that we held at SBCC, the Blue Economy Symposium, was basically to launch a partnership with SBCC to do both of those things. City College has identified space adjacent to the Marine Diving Technologies building that we are currently analyzing to determine if there are any fatal flaws, former Indian villages, that sort of endangered species, that sort of thing, to see if it's feasible for us to do an infrastructure project there. And in addition, there will be an academic industry partnership that will create job opportunities for ocean industries or industries that were identified in the blue economy. And to drive the basis of that home, Dr. Peter Rupert, who's sort of the local economic guru for our region and director of the USSB economic forecast, basically made projections on what the blue economy could and does mean to Santa Barbara. So essentially, he said that today, not mentioning the new jobs that are out there, wind and oil platform decommissioning, but presently it's a $7.7 billion item for our regional economy, and one that will turn into $40 million in the next 5 years. So essentially, it provided justification for the direction that we are going with our partnership to provide ocean careers at Santa Barbara City College as well as infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. So back to the STRAT plan, the Strategic Planning Group. Our work group met on August 28th, and then we met on September 17th with Director Wilshire. And our goal was to clarify the purpose of strategic planning and the work group, specifically with regard to the process, forthcoming proposals, the decision-making involvement of the entire commission, and clarifying that this would be a waterfront strategic plan. We've challenged ourselves, the three of us, to clarify the 5-year review process that is the responsibility of the Harbor Commission, the annual priority setting, possibly pursuing funding through a grant process, not through the capital budget or other revenue, and the adoption of a strategic plan that will provide a roadmap for the Harbor Commission and the staff, and also serve as a communication tool for the whole community. So in October, we'll bring the commission specific recommendations for your consideration, for discussion, and also for your approval. We do recognize, along with Director Wiltshire, that the process may be a longish one, since it involves approval of the ways to ensure extensive knowledge on the part of the commission, and this might include the creation of a dashboard, for example, the scope of such a plan, ownership of the various elements, establishing norms, etc. We're going to share our recommendations with you before the Harbor Commission meeting, so you have plenty of time to consider our thoughts. And if you now have ideas, thoughts, and concerns, please share them with us as soon as possible, so we're as efficient as possible with our work going forward. That's it for me. And now we'll go on to the consent calendar and the approval of the minutes. So please read the recommendation.
This is item 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of August 15th, 2024.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Please call for the vote.
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner Stedman, seconded by Commissioner Nelson, to approve the consent calendar. Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stedman?
Yes.
Chair Stanowicz?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously with Commissioners Cohen and McCray absent.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. Mr. Lopez, can you please read item number 2?
This is item 2, update on Senate Bill 2 and impacts to Harbor Patrol. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a staff report and presentation outlining the requirements of Senate Bill 2 and how it will impact Harbor Patrol and law enforcement services going forward.
Good evening, Chair Stanowicz, Harbor Commissioners, and members of the public. My name is Nathan Aldridge, and I would like to provide the Commission with an update on the effects of California Senate Bill 2. On April 18th of this year, the Harbor Commission received a presentation on Senate Bill 2, detailing its statewide effects on law enforcement authority, training, and reporting requirements. And as a review, all departments with peace officers must become post-participating agencies, and all peace officers must attend a police academy. So this change affects all agencies, similar to our Harbor Patrol. And we are fortunate that our Santa Barbara Police Chief, Gordon, is a post-commissioner who could guide us through the legal process and conforming to this bill. Up on the screen, as a reminder, I'd mentioned in that presentation that there is no grandfathering for current Harbor Patrol officers or any other peace officers to keep peace officer status who are not conforming with this. And throughout this process, we consulted with POST, the City Attorney's Office, the Santa Barbara Police Department, the City Administrator's Office, Human Resources, waterfront staff, and current Harbor Patrol officers. And once again, as a reminder, Chief Gordon advised as a subject matter expert on this as she sits on the Post Commission as a Post Commissioner. So for the effects on Harbor Patrol, the primary effect going forward will be changing Harbor Patrol's peace officer designation and removing the carrying of weapons. So Harbor Patrol officers will not remain armed peace officers. The majority of Harbor Patrol duties will remain the same. Officers will have a change in uniform and their duty belt to reflect the transition. Harbor Patrol's primary duties will continue to be emergency medical care, boating safety enforcement, ocean rescue and response, and enforcement of harbors and navigation law, and municipal code violations in the Harbor District. As for what was driving this and how this decision is made going forward, it was a collective decision that's largely informed by the police chief and the city attorney. And we fully evaluated all options going forward and chose the approach that's the most realistic, feasible, and responsive to the needs of the entire community. So as a visual, there will be a new Harbor Patrol uniform. And the only change most people will notice going forward is the officers will be wearing a different colored shirt. This new uniform shirt color and duty belt will communicate the visual transition away from the previous role as an armed peace officer. So in this photograph up here, Officer Martinez is wearing the same duty shirt, badge, nameplate, Harbor Patrol patches, pants, and duty boots, except the color of the shirt will change from tan to navy. And so for law enforcement in the waterfront, the city prioritizes continued law enforcement coverage in the Harbor District and the waterfront area. And our police department here in Santa Barbara will continue to provide all responses for calls of service in the waterfront. Penal code violations or calls for service that may lead to a detention or an arrest. There will be no loss of coverage within the waterfront for all public safety, and this includes law enforcement, fire responses, medical responses, ocean rescues. And in a staff report previously, I detailed the specific harbors and navigation codes that continue to give authority for our Harbor Patrol officers to enforce all provisions of California state boating law, namely 663.5 and 6070.6, as well as our municipal code. And so moving forward, it's important to remember that we have an excellent team of first responders here in Santa Barbara. Not just our Harbor Patrol officers, but City Fire Department, the Police Department, medics. And we will continue to respond to enforce all marine law enforcement and Muni Code violations in the Harbor District. So that's boating safety violations, infractions, and other violations in and around the marinas. The Harbor Patrol officers will continue to respond to their primary duties in medical emergencies, ocean rescue calls, marina fires, and boating emergencies. And the Harbor Patrol will continue to provide the highest level of service to our entire waterfront community. And moving forward, I am happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Vice Chair?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say that the community meeting, which was held on September 9th, was beautifully organized and presented, so thank you very much. I enjoyed a couple of the questions that were asked there, so I'll ask you again. What sort of equipment, quote unquote, will they carry, if any?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Ford. So going forward, the duty belt will consist of a radio and possibly pepper spray. The question was asked if officers can continue to carry that, and the answer is yes, if that's at their discretion. My understanding that hasn't been utilized very often in the past, and if there is a dog attack or something, where we can foresee a situation around the marinas that may be prudent to use that, that's a possibility in an outdoor environment. But all other impact weapons, firearm, taser, handcuffs, a baton, will not be worn by the officers.
Thanks. And the other question, which was also very interesting, was if you could describe the mood and the tone, the response of the existing Harbor Patrol officers.
Yeah, thank you. Dating back to the beginning of this process, it took a while for us to sort of make sense and parse out how this would affect law enforcement agencies throughout the state, through our unit. We've taken great pride into being a first responder team that can handle anything. On the ocean, on land, in the marinas, around the harbor, waterfront, and the beaches. And so initially there was a bit of a shock and sort of disbelief that this really would sort of trickle down to us. I think we take great pride in being able to sort of be first in no matter what it is. After we had met extensively with some of the members and stakeholders that I mentioned, it became pretty clear that the requirements of Senate Bill 2, of which this peace officer designation is a small part, to go fully forward and be in compliance with this, we would have effectively needed to transition to a police department, a mini police department, with our reporting requirements, continuing education, training. And as I had outlined before in a staff report, The seriousness of certain, penal code or misdemeanor arrest calls that we get is a very small portion of our overall job duties. And so to put the time and energy and effort and hiring and money to go into something like that would have been not just an undue burden, but the requirement to send all of the current officers and future officers to a full police academy, to bring someone from the outside in, which is a post-certified field training officer, to then, after they had finished, bring them up to speed on that first year of a peace officer. It just became too onerous to even imagine going forward to do that. So the long answer to you is, after this is digested and we re-examined what our bread and butter is, so to speak, it's marine safety, it's boating safety. That's why we are out there, and that's why our boats are out, and that's why the community depends on us and needs us. We're the only unit that can do this from, Morro Bay down, or Port San Luis down to Ventura. And the types of calls and the call volume we have for boating safety is what really, I think, attracted most of the officers to the position. So morale is very high. I'm proud to report that. We've involved our officers in their safety concerns at every step of the way in this process. First and foremost, that was always my consideration and concern. And quite frankly, the consideration to have either it's all or nothing with the law enforcement and the weapons and the duty belt consideration, it became pretty clear that that was going to be the posture and position that would keep us, I think, the most safe, and also would ensure the most clarity for our procedures and how to handle situations going forward. So throughout this entire process, we try to get many voices involved as possible, and for officers they're excited for this transition. It breathes a little new life, I think, into what we're already doing. We're on the cusp of possibly hiring some new officers moving forward, and I think this sort of revitalization and sort of doubling down on what we do out there, specifically on the water with our rescue vessels, is going to be a really good thing for us moving forward.
Thanks.
Commissioner Nelson.
My question is, I remembered a presentation made by an officer probably, a year or so ago, where there was all the data on the responses that Harbor Patrol officer is required to make. How many for alcohol violations and the like. And you said a very small percentage. Do you actually know what percentage of the incidents and responses that you're required to make are in fact related to their having police powers? I mean, do you know what that percentage is? Is it like 5 or 2?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Nelson. If I recall off the top of my head, I sort of collated the last 2 years of our law enforcement contacts and
Right.
calls for service. It was between 1,700 and 1,800 for both of those years.
Okay.
And calls for service that would have been impacted by this or would be impacted by this turned out to be, I think, 2 years ago was 1%.
Okay,
And last year
okay.
was less than 1%.
And secondly, no Harbor Patrol officer will be deprived of any retirement benefits or compensation. There won't be any, I'm hoping there won't be any impact on the compensation or retirement benefits that one of our officers would receive because of Senate Bill 2. Is that the case?
Yes, it is. I'm happy to say that's affirmative.
Great.
Both, privately and publicly, the city has been very supportive of
Right.
our officers moving forward, specifically because this was a change that was instituted from the outside that we're doing our best to respond to. And so a lot of that is handled at the sort of labor relations level,
Yeah.
but the city has been very supportive, and there's been not a mention whatsoever of that
Okay.
moving forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stedman.
Yes, Nathan, thank you very much. What's the full complement for Harbor Patrol? How many, the staff complement?
Yeah, thank you. So we have one supervisor and lieutenant position, and then 10 sworn officers, or actually 10 officers moving forward from there too. So
And-
11 total.
And what's our current load?
So right now, we are undergoing hiring, like I mentioned a little earlier too. So in process, Hopefully, I'll have some news our next commission meeting about the resolution of this. We're looking to be fully staffed and continue to be fully staffed. The department was fairly progressive in foresight and making sure that we engage in a hiring process aggressively to make sure that we weren't down officers unnecessarily for an undue period of time. So by the time this all shakes out, I think this fall and specifically by the end of the year, we'll keep our 10 officers.
Thanks.
Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you for the update there. I just got two questions for you. One is, when we had the presentation earlier in the year, there was a number of public comment concerning the way we were interpreting it. And so I guess I'm curious, are there other harbors or other similar positions throughout the state that have interpreted it differently and are sticking with the firearms? And then the second question, if there was a harbor patrol member that was certified through the post process, is there any idea of entertaining if we wanted to carry a weapon, or is it just kind of like now that we're following the path of not doing the post, it's the whole department that follows that?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Anderson. To answer your first question, I think initially, my sense is that of the unique units that do our type of a job, they were in different phases of responding to this. We have been fortunate, I think, to get this ball rolling and to get counsel from post legal counsel, from our city's legal counsel. So we've been ahead of, I think, some of our peers in this. There's been some murmuring talk and some from that public comment about other agencies are maybe ignoring this or doing something different. That may have been the case, and without using specifics, in conversation I've had with other harbor masters, that is not the case now. And so they've been told in very clear terms that this absolutely applies to them, and they're going to need to make some changes very quickly, and they do not have the benefit of the runway that we have had in the process and the community messaging too. So this absolutely affects everyone, and I think now I'm fortunate that we've been able to look at this from the long view and have the time we've had to make these adjustments. And to answer your second question, the bill, not only does it make the provision that all officers would have to be fully certified peace officers with the academy attendants, but they would also have to go through a field training officer program, and our department would have to be a post-participating agency. So it would not be able to do a piecemeal approach where one would be able to do this. And so moving forward, our amending of our municipal code is going to strike through the carrying of firearms and the designation of Harbor Patrol as peace officers, and to codify those specific sections in the Harbors and Navigation Code recognizing us as harbor policemen that are able to enforce boating law and also our local municipal code.
Great, and one question I had is regarding the staff report attachment, the amended municipal code there, is that the revised code that's being sent to City Council to vote on, or is that already in the process?
Yes, Chair Stanwyck, thank you. My understanding of the process is any type of revision first goes through Ordinance Committee, and we're on the calendar for the 1st of October for that. And after that, we would go to City Council, which would be that following week of the 8th of October to ratify that.
Great, thanks. Okay. Also, too, just before we conclude, I just wanted to comment on the community meeting that happened on September 9th. So thanks again to the staff who put that on, because I know there was a good degree of public comments at one of our prior Harbor Commission meetings to do some kind of community outreach. So I'm glad that happened, and also wanted to point out that I thought it was well received that we had 2 Harbor Patrol officers there who were both in different uniforms. We had Officer Kelly in the old uniform, and we had Officer Martinez in the new uniform. And just that visual, I think, was helpful to the concerned people that were there, because I think there's just we have this bias where we see a Harbor Patrol officer with a gun and we see a badge and they are dressed like a police officer, And, when we look at their duties that were in the staff report and, the things that they have done, it's not really related to violence, individuals, and things like that, like I think people see. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And, also speaking from me personally, 7 years as a liveaboard, I think of all the positive interactions that I've had with the Harbor Patrol. And I think of a courtesy tow that I received back to my slip from my engine, a oil spill in the harbor, or just the flare and fire demo that they do. And, once again, it's not related to violence. It's their duties are kind of different. So I think when people see like a disarmament of an officer, it's not that case at all, really, based on their traditional duties. So I just want to say that I'm glad that we had the police chief there, and that everybody from the Harbor Patrol is that they feel good about this transition, and that we could kind of put this best foot forward in line with the police and post and everything. So thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we can move on to item number 3 of new business. Mr. Lopez, please read item number 3.
This is item 3, proposed change of use of Santa Barbara Maritime Museum coffee shop. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from staff outlining a proposal received from the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum to change the terms of their lease to include the sale of beer and wine at their retail and coffee shop store, and recommend forwarding this change of use to the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lopez. And also, too, I just want to remind the commission that this is an actionable item, so they're looking for a recommendation from us at conclusion of the presentation. Thanks.
Good evening, Chair Stanwyck, commissioners and members of the public who may be listening and watching this presentation. My name is Cesar Barrios. I am the Waterfront Business Manager. And today, I bring to you a proposal from the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum located at 113 Harbor Way to change the terms of their lease to include the sale of beer and wine at the retail and coffee shop store currently operated by Dark Coffee. To provide a little bit of background, in April of 2024, Dark Coffee opened for business where the former museum store used to operate. Since then, Dark Coffee has become a hub of activity in the harbor, quite successful, attracting many visitors early in the morning. They're open at the crack of dawn, around 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. And there's lines out the door. So we're very pleased with this new addition to the harbor community. So with that, the proposed change will allow Dark Coffee to add the option to serve beer and wine during the regular operating hours. And that is between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Likely they will not be selling beer and wine at 7 o'clock in the morning, but those are their operating hours. And also this will include the weekends and holidays where they would like to extend their time from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. depending on the demand, including the time of the year as a summer compared to winter, fall time. So the goal with this is to maximize the use of the space. It's proven that it is quite successful in the mornings. So maximizing the use of that area in the afternoon will be quite, it'll be, I believe, welcomed by the community. It would enhance the visitor experience. So with your recommendation today, the next step in the process includes the change of use review by the Planning Commission to determine whether the change of use is appropriate for this location. Right now, it's currently only based on the lease. They can only operate as a coffee shop that provides pastries and the food that you see being served today. So in regards to the process to make this change of use, first, the Planning Commission will, once it gets forward, the Planning Commission will conduct a review to determine whether the change of use to allow the sale of and consumption of alcohol in this premises is appropriate according to the coastal plan. Once this request is approved, then at that point, the Waterfront Department will need to amend the Maritime Museum lease to include language to allow the sale of beer and wine in the coffee shop space. And then as a final step, once that process goes through, then the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, or in this case, Dark Coffee, would have to acquire and apply for an ABC license to provide the beer and wine. Talking with the museum director, Mr. Greg Gorga, and the owner of Dart Coffee, David Dart, the plan is to have Dart Coffee acquire the ABC license. So once we get to that step, once we get through the planning process, if approved, we will tackle that section and see how that specifically will work. There'll be an amendment to the lease, which adjustments to accommodate this will be enacted. And then just to add, this is somewhat of a lengthy process. Aside from going through the Planning Commission, to acquire an ABC license could take 4 to 6 months from the time of the application. This is well known by both Mr. Gorga and Mr. Dart. So the goal is to hopefully have something, some of this approved by in action by next summer. So at the end, the recommendation is for the Harbor Commission to provide input whether the proposal from the Maritime Museum should be forwarded to the Planning Commission for review. That's why we're here today. In this slide, I provide a few points to consider. First is the impact on the harbor operations. Evaluate the potential impact of the proposed conversion on harbor operations and any associated concerns or benefits of adding providing an ABC license to this establishment. Also, to assess the compatibility of a new establishment serving beer and wine with the surrounding area and neighboring businesses, as well as compliance with the regulations, considering whether the proposal follows the applicable regulations such as parking requirements, coastal policies, and such. And in that regard, it may not require that step depending on what the Planning Commission determines, as currently they're serving coffee. So if they add another component of, in this case, beer and wine, it may not be so in debt, but that's to be determined. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, question.
Commissioner Sutton?
Yeah, thank you, Caesar. So is there economic information that measures the cannibalization effect of Dart Coffee selling beer and wine when, 50 feet up in the air, someone else is selling alcohol, 20 feet in the other direction, someone's selling alcohol, and 50 feet in the other direction, someone's selling alcohol? Are any of the owners of those businesses concerned about the market shift?
Chair Stanoway, Commissioner Stedman, good question. That was the same question that we had when this proposal came to us. And I've been in contact with the majority of the business owners in the surrounding areas. And thus far, I've heard a lot of support for this idea. There's this, we have new owners of Breakwater Restaurant, Brophy Brothers. They're well established. They see a benefit to having attracting more people to this location. The goal is for them to come in and grab a glass of beer and wine, and then grab food upstairs or go to adjacent restaurants. So thus far, the input I've received has been quite positive. Once this advances, if you advances today, we will discuss this further with all of our tenants within the harbor area, just to ensure that we follow the public process and everyone gets a chance to express any concerns, if there are any. But as far as any quantification or any numbers, thus far I don't have any information. This is very early stages. Right now it's just the proposal, and if this pushes forward will likely be doing more analysis of how this would impact the area and the benefits, and not the benefits to the other locations. But as in other areas of town, for example, the Funk Zone, you have several businesses that offer similar products, in this case, alcohol, beer, wine, and thus far, they've remained successful.
No, thank you, that's a great answer. I suppose, just observing the Dart coffee market, it's a different market anyway, right? So, interesting reactions, though, from other owners.
Commissioner Stearns, just to add on, one of the main
Yes.
reasons we're bringing it here this early to you all is to air it out in a public process. So Caesar went to all of the neighboring tenants and made them aware of this agenda item. So this is kind of really a perfect forum for people to either submit comments or be here personally. We didn't receive any comments from any of the neighboring tenants, and so I think this was a kind of a good place to have that discussion.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a little surprised with it. That's awesome.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes, thank you for that. I got a few questions. Let's see. Have they gone as far as drawing the map of where they want to be able to serve? Are they kind of just staying within the kind of boundaries that we see here? Or are they looking to expand all the way across?
Commissioner Anderson, good question. The idea is for them to serve within their interior of the coffee shop and their patio space.
Okay.
So the attachment that's in front of you with the report, that's the entire lease for the Maritime Museum. So the goal is not to permit the sell one in the entire building. This is primarily just the coffee shop space.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And then have you all checked with, I know personally getting ABC permits, they depend a lot on the local law enforcement and possibly the harbor patrol as well. Do you know if they've reached out to get the opinion of the police department, or has the harbor department weighed in on any concerns of navigating one more alcohol vendor?
My understanding is that they have not reached out to law enforcement. However, we have reached out to our liaison and the police department with any concerns. Generally, the answer is that they need to see the application first, but overall, I have not received any. Even when I brought it up initially, I did not get any significant feedback or anything negative on the addition.
Great. And the last one, do they sell at the other location? Do they sell alcohol at the other location? Does anyone know? I think it's just coffee, right? So it'd be a new little venture.
Correct.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
I was reminded this week at a subcommittee meeting that we had with the Waterfront Department staff that, it's our responsibility when a change of use, when a conveyance of a lease is before us, and it's our time to ask questions about whether it's in the best interest of the Waterfront Department and the city. And I think, personally, in this case, that is definitely the case. It's in the best interest of the waterfront because of the great work that museum does. I think it is an attraction that is important to those other vendors that are selling alcohol and food and all that. It's a reason to come to the harbor. And secondly, I think in the old master plan and even in the new local coastal plan, there is an emphasis on working with nonprofits to make sure they're successful. The only thing that I would have appreciated that would have been when we have one of these big changes is to at least invite the lessee or the tenant to speak with us. I would love to have talked to Greg and have him tell us how important this is to his operations, because nonprofits have a difficult time. And I know that this commission, when it hears from, most it's been in a punitive situation, our actions and decisions sometimes are made by the testimony that's received. So in terms of future items like this, it might be great to invite them to come in and speak with us. But as far as this action is concerned, I think it's a great idea. I've been there. I mean, usually when I come to meetings at the waterfront, it's in the harbor classroom. And in the last 2 months, I've been to like 5 meetings at Dark Coffee. So it really is an important attraction, and I think they'll do well, and I hope we can help them.
Thanks, Commissioner Nelson.
And Chair Stanhope, I just wanted to, Commissioner Nelson's point, this is really a really kind of preliminary discussion. And so by way of process, if this goes the way of actually amending the lease, it will come back to Harbor Commission. And so this was really just a chance to kind of get a conceptual feel for what the community, what Harbor Commission feels. And so we really can't answer all the questions now because this was really kind of just a community touch-in to see what the neighboring tenants and yourselves, Harbor Commission, felt about it. So if it goes down that path, we'll be back in front of you all with a kind of a more formal process.
Great.
Thanks, Director Wiltshire. Yeah, I think this is a really good case study of a business success story. I mean, you look at this picture right here, and I mean, 2 to 3 years ago, I mean, it was never used by anyone, which is kind of hard to believe. And now it's just this vibrant area that people are going to, attracts visitors, locals, and I mean, yeah, it's just it's a great resource that I think is being used to its potential now. So I think it's wonderful to hear this. Okay, also, is there any public comment on this, Mr. Lopez?
There are no hands raised and no speaker slips submitted, Chair Stanwyck.
Okay. Okay, with that, do we have a motion to move this forward?
I am willing to make a recommendation that the Harbor Commission make a motion to move this proposal forward and encourage the Maritime Museum to take this matter to the Planning Commission. And if necessary, one of us would show up at the Planning Commission meeting to support the application. Thank you.
I second that.
Great, we have a motion, and we have a second. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Okay. Mr. Lopez, could we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner Nelson, seconded by Commissioner Stedman, as described by Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Cohen is absent. Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner McCrae is absent. Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stedman?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
And Chair Stanwyck.
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously with Commissioners McCrae and Cohen absent.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 4. Mr. Lopez, can you please read item number 4?
This is item 4, Waterfront Department Fiscal Year 2024 Preliminary Budget Review. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a staff report and presentation providing a brief summary of the Waterfront Department's preliminary revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 2024 as of June 30th, 2024, and provide comments as appropriate.
Chair Stanwyck, Commissioners, members of the public again, my name is Cesar Barrios. This is my last presentation today, and I will provide you with a brief budget review of our year-end fiscal year 2024, which ended in June 30th of 2024. And we'll dive right in. Here you have a table with the revenue summary for fiscal year 2024. Just to kind of go over the table here. On the left, there are the various revenue descriptions, and then the fiscal year 2024 budget to the right. Then the following column shows the actuals at the end of the year. Then whether it was over or under the budget. Then the percentage variant, and the last column to the right shows the actuals for fiscal year 2023 to give you some comparison. As shown in the table, fiscal year 2024 revenues exceeded the budgeted revenues by nearly $900,000, or that's about 5%. This was mainly the result of stronger than expected revenues in the parking division and slip transfer fees, which were 17% and 34% higher than the budgeted amounts, respectively. The majority of these descriptions are very clear. As you can see on the top, we have leases, commercial food service. But then, however, others are not as descriptive, so I'll provide some detail on that. Other fees and charges, That includes livable fees, wharfage and dockage, boat wash, and the ice house revenues. In rents and concessions, these consist of other types of leases, such as the yacht club, UCSB sailing, the NOAA offices, Clean Seas, Simwe. These are leases that we have with water space as well, and the CAM use, which is a common area space of the Waterfront Center where the Maritime Museum is. And miscellaneous includes the cruise ship revenue, and a small portion of that is also the Harbor and Seafood Festival revenues. So this slide provides some highlights from the table that I just showed you. Overall actual revenues versus the budget revenue itself. So the revenues were $186,716 above fiscal year 24 budget. Overall, the parking revenue, which includes both all of our outer lots and Stearns Wharf, was 17% up, or just over $600,000 versus the budget amounts, making this one of the best years on record for the parking division. And also, for the first time in its history, the Harbor Main parking lot alone broke $1 million in revenue. Even after the recent increases in parking rates, or what we noticed just by occupancy levels, not just the fees, the revenues alone, since this is a function of the fee increases we had over the last 2 fiscal years. We're still seeing higher visitation numbers that we had in the years past. So we're still in the uptick since the pandemic. So parking overall continues to be overall low cost for visitors, and also for our everyday users that take advantage of the parking permits. Slip transfer fees, they remain strong. As you can see here, we had a total of 101 transfers in fiscal year 24, resulting in about $1.4 million in revenue. That's a 34% increase over the budgeted amounts from last year. And talking to Ms. Prasinski, she explains that we had a lot of smaller vessel transfers this past year, a lot of like 25s and 30 footers. Last year we had, from what I recall, about 73, 75 slip transfers. So we saw a significant increase since 2023. Now switching gears to some of the negatively impacted revenues. What you see in red here, that's the leases and that's the food service. That's restaurants on the wharf and the harbor, and it's down 10%, or $342,000 compared to the budgetary amounts. This is a significant decline in revenues, primarily due to the adverse weather conditions we had the first part of the fall and winter season. That was around second quarter and third quarter. And then overall, the economy hasn't really kick-started as we expected it to happen. This past summer, even during weekdays, we saw very low occupancy within our tenants. And also we had impacts to revenues from larger tenants that were performing renovations since quarter 2, and then were shut down for several months, in which some of them necessitated temporary closures and deferments in rents. Moving on to other fees and charges, we were down 12%. That's about a negative $55,000, including revenue. This includes the revenues from skiff tie-ups, the ice house, liveaboards, the wharf, dockage. And then, again, this we believe these impacts are still due to the inclement weather, all the heavy rain we had this past year. Okay, moving on to expenditures. So this is the summary for fiscal year 24. On the left, again, just like the other, similar to the other table On the left, there are various expenditure descriptions, and then we have the fiscal year 24 budget. Then the following column shows the actuals at the end of the year, and then whether it was over or under the budget, along with a percentage variant. And then the last column shows the percentage of use compared to the budgeted amounts. Overall, the expenditures of just over $18 million equals to 96% of the annual budget through the end of the fiscal year. All expenditures were below or at the budget amount, so we fare fairly well. The most significant material savings took place in salaries and benefits, material supplies and services, special projects and equipment. And then on this next slide, I will provide more detail on that, on the highlights. So the actual expenditures were $147,840 below the budget expenditures. So that is an amount that's going into our surplus, is added to our added revenues, which adds up to about 1.7 million, I believe. It'll be in my following slide. So on salaries and benefits, we finish below 3% below the budget for fiscal year 24. Some positions remained vacant through the start of that fiscal year. That included the senior property management specialist position. The person retired in September of 2023. The harbor operations manager position that remained vacant for some months. Then we had some facilities maintenance workers that were full-time staff that were still vacant, as well as numerous hourlies in parking and also facilities. In materials and supplies, we ended at 6% below the budget amounts. Significant savings were realized in nearly every waterfront section in this category. These savings were mainly the result of careful and conservative planning that we continue to do since 3-4 years ago in pandemic times, and been quite successful at trying to be prudent with our spending. Part of that, it's maintenance contracts and materials that were not that the funds that were allocated for maintenance contracts that we should not perform. Our facilities division was quite busy all year long, and some of these projects did not take place and will likely take place in fiscal year 2025. Part of these savings also consists of unused funds for projects and other constructional plans in parking division as well. Then on special projects, we were under budget by nearly $39,000, and that's the result of the encumbered funds held by the commercial fishermen remaining funds for the grant matching that's still unspent in our account. That's under the special project section. Then on to equipment. We were under by 70%. That's primarily the savings are in computer hardware and software. We allocate a certain amount of money every year to replace computers. We go through cycles. Every 5 years, we do higher spending. Then we eventually must replace equipment, and we do a higher tier. Also, Harbor Patrol did not require replacement of any of their turnups this year. They were not on the cycle. And also, there was no expenditures in firearms, ammunition, or other type of equipment that at this point did not have to be replaced, especially with the new changes coming up to their unit. Lastly, the facilities division saved about $40,000 in equipment rental. Again, this is due to projects that did not take place, therefore did not require additional spending for rental equipment. Okay, so just to thinking ahead, providing some light on what's coming up. So we are in the process to start the next budget's 2-year planning cycle for the budget. So as you may know, the city operates on July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. So now in December, actually, as of this coming month, staff, we're starting to work closely with our finance department to put together a budget. Then here you can see all the process that requires all the way from planning, inception, to all the way to city council approval. I will not go through every single point, as you can see here, but council will finally approve the budget in June. And along the way, we'll have several meetings. We'll bring that budget to you for your review, and then we'll discuss this with the budget work group as well. And all those meetings are to be determined. This past year, we had 2 meetings, and we can, generally, it's at the discretion of the budget work group to have as many meetings as required to ensure we receive the input. Okay, so in summary, we had a strong fiscal year 24 in revenues and expenditure savings. Overall, we have a surplus of $1.7 million at the end of fiscal year 24. Higher than expected, as I mentioned, in parking and slave transfer fees, and lower than expected revenues in food service and tenant rents. And expenditure savings primarily through the vacant positions that I spoke about. Planning for the future, we're being cautious. We have concern of what's coming up with the economy. It's an election year. We'll see how things are gonna turn out. But we're paying close attention to the market. Again, we have the concern with food service and tenant-related revenues. And one of our goals is to revise future parking revenue estimates based on past year averages, just to provide a more realistic number on our projections. I know we've dealt with some uncertainty on how the economy was going to work out, so we were very conservative. But now our parking revenues came up much higher than we had originally projected to complete the year. Also, we must rebuild the reserves to cover increasing insurance premiums, as we discussed in previous meetings. In pretty near future, our costs, just a deductible for example, on the wharf, will be close to $3 million to cover any type of incident that may require use of insurance. Also, for larger future capital projects, we're trying to build robust reserves to replace Marinas 2, 3, and 4. That will be a significant project, and I believe our facilities managers are already looking into how that will look like. But planning is very important. So even though we do have a surplus, those funds will be very important in the years to come, as far as all these processes we have in place. And lastly, we do have a coastal resiliency project. It's a citywide project as far as sea level rise. It's a 30-year sea level rise adaptation plan. And that is something that will require funds as well, as we deal with sea level rise, and as we've already seen in the last few winter cycles. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrios. Commissioner Nelson.
I have one, congratulations. That's really good news. I mean, this was an unpredictable year, and there was horrible weather. We dealt with it, and your budget was a good one, and we're 5%. That's great. But on terms of 3 specific aspects of the budget, one, the parking. If the parking continues to increase and perform as well as it has, have we ever considered building a parking garage?
Commissioner Nelson, it's come up in the past, at least in my capacity as a parking supervisor some years back. It was an idea that was brought up, I believe, even one time at council. But it was more of a comment.
All right.
But we're in a coastal zone, so I imagine it will have to go through a significant vetting to get to increase parking. Right now, we are not at capacity. I mean, our policies that we've enacted since 2019 with the use of our parking permits, which cut down on misuse of their lots, significantly opened space in Harbor Main. You go there on any given weekday, and it's just.
Okay, and then the issue of the lease revenues for food service was off by 10%. And no question, again, there was bad weather. But we did do those deferrals. Of that 10%, whatever contribution the deferrals caused that 10%, we're going to get that back. Because all of the agreements on the deferrals that we did require a payback of any outstanding rents, correct?
That is correct, and currently those payments are being made as currently.
So that 10% obviously will shrink as everyone pays what they owe.
Commissioner Nelson, I think something good to note is those deferred rents are booked as revenues. So from an accounting point of view, they are not baked into that 300-something thousand.
Okay.
So because we have a lease agreement that those revenues will be paid back, we essentially book them as if we received them.
Okay.
So that 300,000+ is on top of those deferred rents.
Okay. Thank you. And then the final question, and I hope Commissioner Cohen is watching. She expressed some concern at one time about the slip transfer fees not being adequate when we were raising fees for slips and things like that. Well, to me, clearly, our program, recommended by one of our subcommittees, was to try to balance things out incrementally to make sure that, the larger slips were paying as much as the smaller slips, and then moving towards a sort of a base rate based on percentage of value. To me, these numbers are good and suggest that nothing that we did or we recommended or actions subsequently taken by the Waterfront Department really had a negative impact on our budget or on our revenues. Quite the contrary. Things are really going well in terms of slip transfer fees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a tough revenue source. It's our toughest one to predict. It can, if we could have 100 transfers a year or 50, it really depends on the market. The only thing that we could confer anecdotally is that there have been a lot more kind of sub 35-foot transfers, and those are the transfer fees that we have been reducing. And so as the public and the community know more about that, they may be more inclined to wait until July 1st of the next year, because so there's less large transfers and more small transfers because they're getting cheaper.
Commissioner Stedman.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Chair. Is there an update on the recoupment of the expense from FEMA for the revetment project?
Yeah, Commissioner Stedman, long process. I can't stress it enough. It's potentially multi-years, decade type long process. We've gotten pretty sound confirmation that the large portion of the work that we did, so essentially the $1 million rock revetment wall, is not going to be reimbursed. There is some likelihood that some of the other stuff, cleaning up sand and debris, so some of the smaller elements, but that big ticket item, really summarizing it, but FEMA's take is that there was no permanent structure there to begin with, and so they pay to repair things essentially. So in putting a rock wall there, it's a newly built structure, and so their perception of that is that they would refund us to put a sand berm back there because the sand berm was damaged, but not a preventative new structure.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. My second question is, has there been a change to the capital reserve requirement?
No. A couple years ago, we went to council and essentially changed the Harbor Preservation Fund, which was kind of weird. It was an odd way that we held our reserves. It was like a target between $2 million and $5 million. And it had been that way for decades, and so it was kind of this non-moving, non-inflationary target. We adopted for a capital reserve the same policy that enterprise funds have citywide, and so we essentially use a look ahead of our capital project program and take an average of 3 years, and that dictates what our capital reserve needs to be. So it's really based on the capital projects that we have coming down the pipe, as opposed to some kind of arbitrary number of $2 to $5 million. So that was the only change, and that happened, I think, 2 years ago. And so we're meeting that target, and that's our new capital reserve target.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson.
Similar to Commissioner Nelson, I think the parking and the food service items do kind of stand out. I would have thought that would be a positive correlation between the two. Having more people park would, I assume, have more people eat regardless. It's over the same period with the weather. The parking revenue budget number, I know we made late changes to the fees. Did we update that number after increasing the hourly rate?
Yeah, we did. It's tough because when you change the price of something, you don't know if it's going to impact demand or not. And so we were a little bit conservative. We didn't kind of just straight play it as if we would get the same amount of parking at the exact same rate. And we kind of were conservative in the fact that we thought, hey, we're tapering down from the COVID frenzy. It turns out like not only did we generate more revenue, but actual parked cars numbers were higher as well. And so there was really just a general increase in activity and people parking down there, independent of the price increase. But in short, we did make an adjustment for the hourly price increase. But being a few years out of COVID, it was really hard to, COVID kind of skewed averages, and so we'll have a little bit of a better data now that we're 3 years out. So for our next 2-year budget cycle, we'll have that price increase and kind of revised parking data to try and nail that one a little better. At least it was on the positive side, not the negative. It's always nice to kind of get the win instead of be under budget, but
Sure.
Yeah, it was higher than we anticipated.
And then another question would be, I know it's kind of early days in the new fiscal year. Have we gotten feeling on how the new like Moby Dick spot is going, and obviously how DART is going to be contributing to the food service side of things? I know it's a fairly small footprint, and coffee is less than meals and beer, but
Yeah, Commissioner Anderson, good question. Yeah, anecdotally, they've been doing fairly well. Especially on weekends, they've had a lot of visitations to their new oyster bar. And no, we're excited that
I think we're all raising our hand up here. Yeah. Yeah.
But to add to that, we, from our food service tenants, we collect their revenues, or they provide their revenues to us monthly, and so Moby's revenues are up, largely to do with the oyster bar.
And then lastly, this is a smaller, a little more granular item, just looking at the liveaboard fees, $150,000 a year. Is there 100 permits for that?
We,
Or
by
100?
code, we allow 10% of our total slips, so it's about roughly 110 we allow. We're down right now, so there's some in the mid 80s or high 80s of liveaboards, so we've seen like a decrease over the last couple years of people living aboard.
So is that like, is the average about $1,500 a year of fees per permit that they pay?
That would be a good way to look at it if you're assuming 100.
Yeah.
The fees are, I believe they're $144 per month per liveaboard vessel.
And that
And
includes?
that's a flat fee.
It's a flat fee, includes utilities?
They pay electricity on top of that, but
Okay.
not water.
Not water, okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson.
One more thing. I can vouch for the quality of oysters that are shucked at Moby Dick. I spent more for lunch at Moby Dick than I have ever spent in the last 5 years on Stearns Wharf. But you raise a good point that when you mentioned in your analysis that you've got the replacement of, marinas 2, 3, 4, And I'm becoming aware that our capital program is $2 million a year. Obviously, the replacement of those 3 piers is far in excess by scale of what our capital program can afford. So we're going to have to look into other ways to generate revenues or do debt service. And I assume that you'll present to the subcommittee how you're going to approach that. Just like you came to us well in advance on the change of use at the Maritime Museum, it'd be great to know how you're heading financially on something that big. And as well as the real kicker was sea level rise, which again, I remember Melissa Hetrick's, presentation, and it was like $4 billion. So those numbers are so big that we're going to have to move in directions that we probably haven't in a long while, and it would be great if the commission, you can take us along with how you grapple with that. And as an anecdote, I was, as a former, park builder and operator, I appreciated seeing in the recent articles about bond issues, capital bond issues by the city. I saw the renovation of the park, I guess it's Jack Murphy Park, was in the bond bill, which is really great. And if a recreational field restoration can work its way into the city's general obligation bond funding, I would hope that the waterfront, given its importance, or the 3 piers or sea level rise, could also find its way into that as well. So that's why I'm suggesting that we have an interest in how you solve that problem. Thanks.
Just to get some information out there on that topic, so this is really kind of a design and planning year for Marinas 2, 3, and 4. So we set aside about $150,000. Our facilities manager, Brian Adair, who's not here today, has been working with various marina designers and planners, Bellingham Marine being one of them. And so we're hoping within the next kind of 6 months that we'll have some conceptual design and plans together. We're not there yet. That'll lead to cost estimates. And you're absolutely right. These are projects that are beyond the bank account that we have. It's advantageous if we can save up reserves and not have to borrow against that. So we can do what we can to help have those funds on hand, but we'll inevitably have to find some way to borrow from. And with respect to the sea level rise, that's just such a big issue. We're really lucky right now. We've been given a $1.5 million grant, and so that work is embarking right now. We had kind of a citywide meeting down at the waterfront a few weeks ago. That'll take 12, 18 months, but that'll also drive a plan and kind of dictate some costs. The hope is that as Santa Barbara, we're relatively ahead of the pack with coastal communities, so maybe there will be state funding and such things like that for that sort of thing. So we're not at a point where we're budgeting waterfront dollars for the construction of that sort of thing right now, because that type of stuff, we're really hoping that there's some state or federal support.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's why I'm glad to hear that, you're actually having conversations about economic development and that the waterfront is part of it, because I believe if you took the data analytics that Visit Santa Barbara does, that the most important cultural and economic asset the city has, and it completely owns, is the waterfront. And so we ought to get special distinction and not just be, try to do everything with our slip fees, as opposed to recognizing just how important the waterfront is to the economy of the city of Santa Barbara. And I'll leave it at that.
Great, thanks. Any other comments regarding the budget? Okay, thanks for the presentation, Mr. Barrios. We can move on to the department update. Item number 5, the harbor operations report.
Good evening, Chair Stebbin, once again, and Harbor Commissioners and members of the public. I'm Harbor Operations Manager Nathan Aldridge, and I would like to present to you this evening's Harbor Operations Report. Our first update involves Abandoned Vessel Disposal Authority. In a few weeks, we will be bringing a council agenda report and resolution to the Santa Barbara City Council, codifying our authority to dispose of abandoned vessels that meet the criteria of Harbors Navigation Section 522. We did this before with a similarly abandoned vessel, but this resolution gives the waterfront the ability to dispose or abate of any wreck or dilapidated vessel in our waters. And so the Waterfront Department took advice from our city attorney to get blanket authority through the resolution rather than needing to go one by one each time this occurs. And this will help remove abandoned vessels from our navigable waters and keep them off the beaches or indefinitely in slips from the harbor in a timely manner. And I have added an excerpt from this section of code of 522, and without reading it verbatim, in a nutshell, provides that any derelict or wrecked part of a vessel, sunk or beached, or allowed to remain in any type of unseaworthy or dilapidated condition without a watchman for over 30 days is considered abandoned property. And so therefore, after, with this resolution, our city, if we do not give consent for this to be abandoned or left, we may immediately take title of this abandoned property. So specifically for this case, we have an abandoned vessel in our marina. It's dilapidated, filled with water and diesel fuel. So a couple images that our Harbor Patrol officers took of this. On the left, you can see the engine compartment completely flooded with this, and also the aft cabin is also completely inaccessible. It's impounded in a slip. After this resolution passes, the waterfront can immediately take title for purposes of abatement for this. So in rare situations involving a federally documented vessel that is sort of bounced between owners or may have one or more liens associated with it, this enables us to dispose of it. And the key phrase in Harbors Nav 522 is without its consent expressed by resolution of its legislative body. And so what we'll do is we'll create a resolution stating the city does not give consent for this abandoned vessel or any abandoned vessel to remain within our jurisdiction. And once again, discussion with our city attorney's office is the best way to codify under our law to dispose of any of these wrecks, regardless of whatever previous lien or legal status they have. And my second update involves upcoming lobster season. So coming up, commercial fishers may set traps just before the season effectively starts. And the Waterfront Department allows them to stage these in our launch ramp to aid in their operations. So this is a privilege we've given for years. On the 23rd of this month, marked lobster traps may be placed in the water for no more than 9 days before their opening. The commercial season starts the 2nd of October, running through the middle to the end part of March. And our sign-up program that we have instituted allows them to come and pre-register for a parking slip and to stage a lot of these traps in the launch ramp to aid in their operations and loading of these traps in their fishing grounds. There's a slight difference in the recreational lobster season and the commercial season. The way they differentiate is the recreational season starts at 6 o'clock on the Friday preceding the first Wednesday of October. And so for this year, that would be the 27th. And it's right just before midnight on that, going till the first Wednesday of the 15th of March. And so for that trap staging and launch ramp, starting this Saturday, commercial fishers can stage their traps. They need to prepay and reserve. They started reserving last week. They can either call our office or come in person. One stall will be per fisher, $8 per day, 14 days max, and 27 stalls we have reserved for this to help our fishers support them. And I'm happy to answer any questions about those two items.
Vice Chair Ford.
Thanks. You gave a shout out for making improvements to the program. What were those improvements?
Yeah, thank you. Our administrative supervisor, Jeanette Przinski, and our parking supervisor, Nicole Tellis, were instrumental in making sure that we can work together to find a way and a system that helps our commercial fishermen and fishers without overly or unduly impacting the public access to that launch up area. So last year was the first year that we started a reservation and a fee program for this that our administrative supervisor, Jeanette Przinski, instituted. It's a fantastic way to make sure that we know exactly who is going where. It limits the spaces to the sort of far westernmost edge of that, still allows access to launch ramps, to other vessels being dropped off, possible regatta uses of that area too. Received no pushback whatsoever from the people who participate in this. I think they all appreciate, once again, the privilege and the benefit of this. So thank you for that reminder.
Commissioner Nelson.
Isn't Harbor Festival coming up?
That's correct. Next month on the 19th, on Saturday, there will be an item for my harbor operations report in greater detail, but the preparations have begun long ago on the Harbor and Seafood Festival. So once again, it'll be exciting to see all of your faces, and we're lining up the City Pier lobsters, the albacore booth, the barbecue, vendors, nonprofits. Looking forward to a great year again, and I've got a lot of excited emails and voicemails about that. So we're about a month away or so. Yeah.
Great. I have a quick question. What goes into a city council resolution? I know you guys have that draft proposal, but what's really the process there regarding something like this?
Yeah, thank you. I can speak to it from my more limited experience in engaging with them. I know Director Wiltshire or Mr. Lopez, in his experience, has seen a lot of these through, depending upon the different departments. So the language is fairly formulaic, and what it does is it states the different sort of actions and intentions that are going to go into what it says resolve, or our resolution is to, and I can submit one to the Harbor Commission next month as an attachment as well to see. There are also public documents going for our ordinance committee. So for this, generally they're about 1 page or so detailing sort of a little bit of background, fiscal impact, what this will do, and then powers going forward.
Yeah, and one good thing to add on that, or one point of clarification. So resolutions, it's kind of like a standardized council document, so you can think of it almost like as like a council policy, so something that they agree to and the clerk files it away, and that's kind of a council directive. And the other thing that we deal with a lot are ordinances. That's something a little bit more official. I mean, if you're changing municipal code or something that's longer than 5 years, that's essentially codified through ordinance, and an ordinance requires council approval and then that 30-day waiting or appeal period, so it's kind of even an extra formal layer. So some of our leases that are agreements longer than 5 years will go as an ordinance as well, and so those are really like the two major types of council actions.
And Chair Stanwyck, to follow last, what this sort of resolution will do is basically formally stating that the council does not give its consent to have abandoned vessels remain indefinitely in the Waterfront District. Harbor's navigation law currently gives us the authority to remove them, but in talks with the city attorney, they thought it'd be prudent to get a resolution in order just to make sure that we have both of those items lined up in the instance that this does happen.
Great, thanks. Any other questions regarding the harbor operations report? Okay, looks like we are at the end of the agenda today. Do we have any staff communications?
Stole my thunder, the Harbor Seafood Festival, October 19th.
October 19th. All right, looking forward to that. It's always fun. Any commission communications? Would anybody like to speak to anything?
Yes, I'd
Commissioner
like
Nelson.
to applaud the first meeting of Adam Stanwyck as our chair. It's got to be the quickest meeting, most efficient meeting we've ever had.
Yeah, it helps when we only have 5 commissioners present, so, yeah.
That's
thanks-
right.
Thank you.
It has nothing to do with the commissioners that are missing tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. All right, with that, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Okay, motion for adjournment, second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstained? Meeting adjourned.